Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, as we head into a new decade, what trends are likely to emerge in the coming years for business and governments alike as the campaign for equality continues? We'll be talking to Avivah Wittenberg-Cox, an author and also CEO of 21st, a gender consultancy for the workplace. Also, we head to southern Brazil, where indigenous women are suffering from high rates of gender violence. And for the second year in a row, the Oscars snubbed female directors in its 2020 nominations. Not a single woman was nominated for Best Director, sparking an outcry in the film industry. But first, as we embark on a new decade, it's perhaps time to not only take stock, but to look ahead. This is female representation in all areas of all leadership, be it business, government and other sectors, still remains low. Yet by contrast, the number of women at university or entering the workforce is at a record high, not just in developed nations, but right across the global south. Joining me now from London is Avivah Wittenberg-Cox, who's not only an author of several titles, including Why Women Mean Business, but also the CEO of 21st, a leading gender consultancy. Avivah, thank you so much for your time. When you consistently read that companies who are gender and ethnically diverse are up to 35% more likely to outperform others, what is stopping so many companies from advancing equality?
Well, I'd say we're on a journey. We're now entering the third decade of the 21st century, and I think the answer is smart companies have. We've seen a whole group of first mover companies who've made a huge amount of progress on gender balance because they have smart leaders who've been reading some of those reports that you're quoting. But there's a huge majority tail of companies that aren't yet aware of all those statistics and reports. And there's a huge task of educating leaders about the benefits of balance.
And it's repeated right across the board, isn't it?
I think the challenge of the 21st century is to engage men in the discussion and turn it into a win-win balance for business, countries, and couples. This is not a limited subject that should be dealt with and talked about by women, among women, for women. It's everybody, and everybody has to be accountable. And I think that's the big shift we haven't yet seen, is this is still almost entirely a subject run and led by women, and we need to spread the accountability, but also the skills on how to balance.
Looking back over the last decade, Avivah, and given that you've worked with so many organisations on this issue, in your opinion, what are the major stumbling blocks?
I'd say some of the major stumbling blocks is actually how we keep framing this issue. So we keep thinking of it as especially from the company side, it's something that women lack. We need to empower them, help them, skill them up, coach them, prepare them for leadership, build their confidence. And I think that's an entirely obsolete frame at this stage. And the challenge is adapting models and mindsets and get them to adapt to a more 21st century reality, both of talent and markets. And that means learning and understanding more about the culture and skills and advantages of women.
So how do you do that?
How do you do that is the very first step, which is incredibly hard and still incredibly rare, is you got to get it on the right agenda, on the top leadership team's agenda. For the moment, in so many organizations, both private sector and public sector, these are issues that are being given to the Women's Network, to the head of diversity, inevitably to a woman, to run as though the responsibility for balancing this all out lies somehow on women's shoulders, when the reality is the only people who can adapt the model and make it more balanced for both men and women are the people running it. And the people running it for the moment, are still majority male who have a very low level of awareness and skill on how to lead in a more balanced world. So you just got to get it on their agenda, help them realize 3 things: why it matters, how it's going to deliver to their bottom line, to their customers, to their innovation. Help them understand that they are not the wonderful meritocracy that most of them really believe they currently are, and give them the skills to learn how to lead through what is a fairly complex shift in corporate cultures.
Avivah, when you look at your crystal ball, what would you say will be the key trends ahead for the next decade when it comes to workplaces embracing equality?
Well, I'd say I always look back at these big tipping point aids and disruptors. And so I'd say our grandmothers got the vote, our mothers got the pill, our generation, yours and mine, got a good job and a great education. And I hope our children and the companies they join will introduce shared parental leave, because I think that's the next big leveling of the playing field, is that when the world and companies realize that we haven't dealt with something we all share, which is children. There are a number of countries that have voted and legislated it. Now it's about companies facilitating and adapting cultures to actually get fathers to take leave so that they level the playing field. And then all managers will be able to look at men and women in a much more parallel way.
Avivah, it's been lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Now, Brazil has the 5th highest femicide rate in the world, with Indigenous women believed to be the most vulnerable to gender violence. Some 800,000 Indigenous Brazilians live in 450 territories across the country, with most located in the Amazon region. Our team headed to Dourados in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, where Indigenous women are facing the highest rates of violence.
The Dourados Indigenous Reserve is one of the most dangerous places in Brazil for women. Here live 13,000 Guarani Kaiowá people who were displaced from their ancestral lands. Alcohol and drug use are rampant, and many women experience domestic violence. On this morning, Tatiane, a social worker, visits a client who has managed to escape her husband's control.
It happened when I was 6 months pregnant with my daughter. He arrived and kicked me in the stomach. I almost had a hemorrhage.
Milena married when she was 12. After 3 years, when her husband started drinking, he acted on his threats.
He hit me with his ring. He grabbed me by my hair and he started dragging me to the ground. He dragged me and at the same time kicked me until I lost consciousness.
Milena's mother, also a victim of domestic violence, finally convinces her daughter to ask the social worker for help.
In the city, there is electricity, but here, when night falls, it's total darkness. In the city, the police can arrive in a few minutes. Here, often there is no phone network to make a call.
Police did not intervene in this indigenous territory, even though it's only 5 kilometers from the town of Dourados. This social assistance center is the only possible refuge for Guarani Kaiowá women. This is where they take the first step to file a complaint, because many fear going to the city police station. They live in a nightmare in their closed community.
Many women never leave the reserve. Who are their neighbors? Generally their sisters, their mothers-in-law, members of their families. When they want to make a complaint in secret, there's always someone to say, "I saw your wife there."
Violence against women has grown so much that the problem is being addressed at the annual Guarani Kaiowá gathering. On the sidelines of the rituals, women organize a discussion, and some men also participate.
O amor é só no momento da transa, né? Não é assim que os homens pensam?
The state's disengagement in these territories leaves little hope of improvement for generations of Guarani Kaiowá women.
And finally, we're in the middle of awards seasons with all eyes turning towards next month's Oscars. But this year's Academy Award nominations sparked fury in Hollywood as female directors were once more shut out of the Best Director category. This as many expressed anger about the Academy's ongoing failure to address diversity.
It might be Tinseltown's most coveted trinket, but some are starting to ask just how representative the Oscars are, especially when it comes to the nominations for Best Director.
Congratulations to those men.
Best Picture is not much better. Of the 9 films up for the award, only one of them was made by a woman, Greta Gerwig for Little Women. She was nominated for Best Director in 2018 for her film Lady Bird, but lost out to Guillermo del Toro. That prize has only ever gone to one female director, Catherine Bigelow in 2010 for The Hurt Locker.
You think I should be there?
The absence of women in the category this year is not for want of successful films. Lulu Wang's The Farewell was a respected commercial hit. Joanna Hogg's The Souvenir, applauded by critics. And Lorenz Scafaria's Hustlers, a word-of-mouth sensation, sparking anger and surprise when Jennifer Lopez was snubbed for a Best Supporting Actress nod, which some put down to racism.
Everything. The game is rigged, and it does not reward people who play by the rules.
Latinos, being the largest minority group in the country, we cannot be invisible in film. We cannot be erased.
And I do have to just pause for one moment with hashtag Justice for JLo. We don't have to look very far to see the work that remains.
Under fire for a lack of diversity, the Academy's made a concerted effort to include more women and more minorities among its members, but the industry itself is still highly skewed. Of the last decade's top-grossing films, only 4% were made by women, and less than a fifth of female debuts are followed by a second film, which puts Greta Gerwig at the very top of her game, albeit in a lonely spot.
And that's it for now. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.